I'm going to just confirm it.
I don't know. Well, I didn't. I mean, that's what they have to do. I'm not making you do anything, right? Ever. I value my life. Do you want eggs?
I am checking it right.
These are from the chickens.
For YouTube. You're good to go when you are.
All right, City Council Comprehensive Plan Workshop number 3 will come to order, and we will call the roll, beginning Ms. Brown.
Brooke Brown, present.
Alec Robinson.
Phil McDuffie.
Roxanne McKee.
Sarah Hudson.
Gavin Massengill, all present. We will move on to public comment. Do we have any citizens wishing to make public comment on items not on the agenda? See none? All right, great. Now moving on to presentations. Number 2, agenda item number 2, presentation and discussion with Mr. Tom Farrell, Chair of the Comprehensive Plan Strike Force, regarding the following portions of the Comprehensive Plan as recommended by to the City Council by the Comprehensive Plan Strike Force, Parks and Recreation, and Mobility, including BK's Road and Mopac South impacts. Mr. Farrell?
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Tom Farrell, 3223 Park Hills Drive. Parks and Recreation. We've got, I'm going to start this by saying a little bit of history on the park. I think everybody may know that, but just in case anybody's watching or wants to watch this later, they'll know a little bit about it. How close the city of Rollingwood came to not having a park on that. And I know many of y'all know this, but we came incredibly close to losing that area as a park. We had a situation that came up that the park was owned by the Optimist Club of Rollingwood, which may or may not have been a real Optimist Club, but regardless of that, they were dedicated to having playing fields for the youth of the West Bank, and more power to them for doing that, and great. So they had decided to sell this property where our fields are, and they had a couple of people that were interested in buying it, and Rollingwood at that time from heaven, let's just say from heaven, Rollingwood got a refund from the city of Austin that had been worked on for a couple years and been negotiated of $250,000. And they were willing to sell us that area. Some of the developers that were looking at that were going to put houses on that area up there. So we would have just picture houses behind y'all. that's what we would have had on that. So we were able to get that. We had the money that came in through this refund, and we held a vote in the citizens of Rollingwood. And our vote, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the for buying the park was 55% and the negative was 45%. So it wasn't a close, I mean, it was a fairly close election. I was surprised, and many of us worked the city to try to get those votes that we had on that. And it was surprising to me that that was as close a vote as it was. But that's how close we came to not having this beautiful park that we have. That's the crown jewel of Rollingwood on that. So those that don't know, and I'm going to let Flo take over for a second. Excuse me. I'm gonna let Shanti show a few things that Flo took the pictures of on our park. Yes, she is here.
She is.
So
She's
Shanti,
right there.
if you don't mind.
Meadow.
Okay, Shanti Jayakumar, 3309 Park Hills Drive. Flo was my mentor, and what I do bring to you all, it's all with her blessings. It was she and I worked together like two peas in a pod to gather all the history. And a couple of things I wanted to say what Tom said about how we had the money. So the Optimist Club owned and operated this parkland that was zoned residential as a playing field. They used it as a playing field. And it was synchronicity that when the Optimists wanted to sell the land, we, the citizens of Rollingwood, got a refund of $200,000 from the city of Austin for overcharges on all our individual water bills. So whoever was here and paying water bills had paid more money than we needed to. So that money really should have been dispersed within the community to all the people that had been overcharged. But we decided by the 55-40, I don't exactly have the numbers, that we would rather buy the park with that money. It took 3 years of hardball negotiating. I really mean that, because all the newspaper articles outline that, before the city of Rollingwood could finally purchase the 8.934 acres for $250,000. The citizens had taken a straw vote to purchase the land for a park using the refund checks. And by now, in the 3 years, the money had grown to $220,000. And the city put in $25,000. City didn't have much money either. That's how we bought the property. So in effect, we, the citizens, own every inch of that parkland because we put our money in to buy that land. And I will never tire of telling you all that. Okay? So in 1993, we the people finally owned the park. And there was much jubilation and also symbolism when volunteers who proceeded, I'm going to show you all the pictures, to take down Hatley Gate, that, according to Flo and others, was illegally constructed by Mr. Hatley because he didn't own the land. That land was sold to Optimist Club. They owned the land, but he had his gate up there. So, and Tom is in these pictures, it was really barren land. There was maybe a few scraggly trees. And by the way, I didn't introduce Meadow Green, Flo's daughter, is here. They have a closing on the house tomorrow, so they're staying with us for 2 nights. We are delighted. And so she wanted to come and be a part of this gathering here. So Flo was instrumental in asking Tom to gather up people to finally bring the gate down. And she went over to Randall's or something and got some champagne, and with these little Dixie cups, they all toasted we were finally owners of the land. And so these pictures will show you the gate coming down and all the people that were there at the time. And I think, Brooke, you were probably there as well. Anyway, it's a lot of history. And then the other pictures are when volunteers, who were lawyers, doctors, whatever your profession, came with their, wheelbarrows and dug all that land. All those trees that you see now were planted by volunteers. And over the years, they had a group of people, there was no water. So they had to come, people took turns watering the trees. So every single tree and all of that came from volunteers. So just for that, I think you all should take a look. I don't know how to do this, but I can pass it or I can keep it there for you all to look at later, whatever. And then these are the pictures of how they planted. All these people, how they dug and planted, and all of this was done by volunteers. There was no money. Right now we pull out a checkbook. We need to do more of this, seriously. Anyway, so you guys can now know what went into what we have today. All of these people. So if you see some of them are still living in Rollingwood, thank them.
Where's Flo?
Flo was in one of those pictures.
Okay.
She was busy bringing the champagne.
Bringing or drinking?
Bringing and drinking. So, yeah.
Oh,
you
that's
can,
cool.
You know, that has the gate coming down. And see, this was the only tree in the park.
I do remember the
One tree. All of that
Scary.
was barren land. Yeah.
Is that in the same spot where it is now?
So you guys can take a
Full
look.
of spiders.
I'm done. I'll never be done, but.
Thank you, Shanta.
You're welcome.
I think you said 1992.
Two
This is
little
70.
tidbits on that I want to add. One, right after the election, Flo called me and said, I need you to come over here. I'm trying to get this gate down, or entry gate down. And I went over there, and she said, bring your saws. So I went over there. It was metal. And I said, Flo, do you have permission from the city to cut this down now that we own it on that? And she said, sure. So Bill Hamilton, Trip Garza, and I took this gate down. I never knew whether we really had, but regardless, it's down. The other thing I want to point out, and I'd be remiss in not doing this used to be a pit. This was a pit at one time. And the gentleman that actually got that filled was Freddie Mueller. And Freddie did it by being out on BK's Road and stopping and redirecting dump trucks that were headed east that had fill, and he would redirect them over to our deal. If y'all knew, you know, Freddie, you'd know that he was capable of doing that, and he did it. So this is the reason I bring this up is, and as well as all the work that was done by hand on all our citizens, and we had a lot of our residents that contributed to doing this deal. So this was something that we're all happy that we have it. It's well used, and if you look at through the, and those negotiations were very hard, and they were, some of the terms in our deed restrictions that we have are the result of that negotiations that went on during that time period. So it wasn't an open-ended deal. We had to, it was a give and take, and some of it we had to give to be able to take the opportunity to buy the property on that. So, yes.
Tom, are you going to talk about the deed restriction about the sports fields? So,
Uh,
I mean, there's so many people that aren't aware of that.
We do have, we have a deed restriction. Thank you, Roxanne. The deed restriction basically says that this field is going to be used for athletics. We were going to, and I think, and I apologize, I can't remember the exact wording on that, Roxanne, but I think we actually identified certain organizations that we would lease that to be able to provide athletic fields for kids in the West Bank on that. And that is in our deed restriction, which is an important consideration that we have on that.
Doesn't it say youth sports for for children in the Eanes School District?
I think,
think that's
and
the
I'm,
way
I'm
it's
using
worded.
West
In
Bank
West
as the.
West
uh,
Bank, I think it says.
I think it says, it's broader than the Eanes School District, because some areas, I think they used West Bank, but it may be the Eanes School District, but that was the intent.
They also indicated 4 fields, right?
I
Did it
don't
get-
recall if they identified how many they were gonna have or what they were gonna have on that. Now, the gentleman that ran the Optimist Club, also had a little, owned this property just to the, southwest of us, I guess, just beside us here where we now have the parking lot. And they had a, clubhouse, there, that they would have their meetings and cook, steaks and, refreshments, and whatever. And the fact that it stood there as long as it has and it was used as long as it has, the times I was in there, it's a miracle you didn't fall through the floor. That's all I'll tell you. It's, you know, you didn't want to be rocking and rolling in there because it would have come down. But it's a little history that goes on with that. The point of this is, this was a community effort to acquire that, and we came, I thought, very close to not being able to have that. So it's a jewel that we need to cherish and maintain on that. So, getting back to our comprehensive plan. We didn't start looking at, from the park standpoint, we tried to follow, and our instructions from the council was that we were going to follow the park master plan, which was produced in 2018. So we kind of followed that park master plan that was used on that. We did, however, in our survey, ask for people's opinions, and we got several different types of comments that we got from that. One of the issues that everybody seemed to be very, the users of that park and this area down here, and when we talked park there, we talked about all of a potential parkland that we had in Rollingwood. And we do have other potential parkland that we have to use. I'll remind the council, we do have a 2-acre tract, roughly 2-acre tract that's behind Rollingwood Town Center off of Delana Lane that we have. That we've looked at several different options in the past, but we haven't done anything with that. We have some potential right-of-way that could be used as parkland on Delana Lane that ties into the city of Austin, that could be used as a trail or a walking trail or something on that. So we have those, and then I'll remind you that we do have some property off of Edge Grove that we have, and that is zoned commercial, but we're not going to, so we didn't look at that from a parkland standpoint on that. But the one thing that stood out that we got a lot of comments on was shade, and that was a common theme that we had, that people wanted more shade, and specifically they asked for tree shade on that, and it would be primarily for this lower area that we had that did not have enough shade for the playgrounds and playscapes that we have down there. So that was whether or not that would work or not, but that was something that people had a desire for. The other issue that came up was the use of one of our fields for a dog park. And we did not get a majority ruling in each side from our standpoint. We had a lot of different comments that came in on that. Obviously, we have a healthy use of people that own dogs that come and use that park, and there was also a lot of people that would comment that they did not want the dogs to use that portion of the park where the kids would play later. As a committee, we didn't take a position on that. We just relayed what the information was that we got on that. We deferred to the park master plan of 2018 in that regard, and then that plan did call for a separate dog park on that. So you know, that's up to you guys and ladies to decide on how you proceed with that. Shade, I've gone through our recommendations. We did get a number of people that wanted to extend our hiking and bike trails that we had in Rollingwood, specifically where they might tie in to Delana Lane. And I would point this out. One of the comments we received was from the manager of Rollingwood Town Center, and they had offered to be a financial assistance if the city chose to somehow connect that area down there over to Rollingwood Drive, where the city of Austin ties in on that. The old Delana Road used to go under where the bridge is now at the lower part of Rollingwood Drive. And the city of Austin has made a little trail for a portion of that they tie in on that. And we own the right-of-way of old Delana Lane there that goes behind there. Now, we did have some comments from adjacent property owners that they were concerned about how that would be from a standpoint of security to their properties that abut that portion of the trail, which I think is understandable on that. So I would, you know, this is something that we need to work with the city of Austin. That was another common theme, that we should work with the city of Austin Parks Department on how we look at doing all of that. That trail and Delana Lane is used very heavily during ACL. It's a broken part of the Rollingwood Road is obviously not maintained, and it's kind of broken up. The city of Austin has a better trail. There is no lighting down there, so that is something that I think that the Park Commission could look at, and the City Council could direct them to look at, about how that would tie in with the understanding that we have some issues with our adjacent neighbors down there that their concerns should be addressed on that as it goes through. A lot of we also wanted to we also had a lot of comments about expanding our walking trails. There was a plan at one time that was brought up that had the walking trail extended down to going to different areas in Rollingwood that would be extended from tying in the lower portion of our park to the upper portion of our park without the stairway on that. And I think y'all have maybe looked at that or will be looking at that. I think that was a recommendation in the 2018 study on that. So that's kind of where we have. I'll go through the master plan recommendations. Obviously, the first one I put was the shade trees that people wanted. They wanted the master plan had create an overall brand and identity for the park. Right now, the park is identified as Hatley Fields on that, and it was historically there's been a question whether that should be Hatley Field or not on that. So it is what it is, I guess, on that. Expand programming opportunities for teenagers, adults, and seniors. I'll remind everybody, if you haven't, historically we have had some movie nights down in this lower area occasionally on there that we've had. So there are some other opportunities that might come in on that. And if anybody wants to bring anything up on that, we can. Provide a separate off-leash dog area, and I realize this is a very contentious issue, and it probably needs to be thought through very well, and I think this is our dog owners are residents and neighbors of Rollingwood, and they have rights to use that. I'll remind you, in our lease agreements, Rollingwood residents get to use those fields when they don't have organized sports activities on that. Create multi-purpose fields that allow for additional sports programming and unstructured play. Again, we do have some deed restrictions that we have to adhere to as to how we do that. We've been fairly open about that over the years of allowing some of our lease portion of that to be sublet to different type of activities on that. And I remember the deed restrictions just cover those fields. It does not cover our area out here. Rollingwood owns that previously, so we're not covered down here. So you might see activities that occur down here that would not necessarily be in the deed restriction, be fully covered by the deed restrictions for that upper area on that. And then lastly, and I'm doing these in reverse order, extend and improve our walking trail and make an accessible connection between the lower and upper parks. And we've talked about that a little bit on that. And that is what I have for the parks. If there's any questions or comments, I'd be delighted to try to answer them for you.
Questions, Council?
I have one question.
Yes, sir.
Can you talk about the on-street parking idea along all streets adjacent to the park? I mean, my understanding is it wasn't always a yellow curb there, and that was put in at some point because of safety reasons?
It was, and this has been it has been an issue as long as I've lived in Rollingwood, 40-some years on that, Alex. And it occurs, part of the solution that the city undertook, and I can't remember when now, but we spent $300,000 paving this area. This used to not be paved, and the parking was a lot more haphazard than it is now.
2009.
It was 250.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2009.
250. 250. I stand corrected. But that was in today's dollars. But that was that was an effort to make to provide additional parking, a structured parking deal to help alleviate the off-street parking on that, Alex. We have, when the pool has a meet and we have events at the park, we have X amount of cars, and there's just so many parking spaces we're going to get on that. So it happens. I know you're on ground zero, so it happens, 2 or 3, 4 times a year for the most part?
Yeah, starting like on the weekends and stuff this time of year.
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't bother me too much. I like having activity in the people. I was just kind of wondering, like, in the history of, like, okay, they're used on the other side. I guess parking was allowed at one point, and then perhaps it got yellow curb at some point.
We tried to keep the streets open enough so that you could get traffic through there, even though that is a fairly wide area of Rollingwood Drive on that. But when you end up with kids getting out of cars, opening doors, it does present a problem. Now, I will say one other thing in that regard. We did do a park. We did do and go get a traffic warrant. At that time, we required a traffic warrant for any speed limit under 30 miles an hour. And we did get a warrant for putting in a 25 miles an hour on Rollingwood Drive and a 20 around for a park zone on that. So that, again, that's a safety issue, that we had on that. We did have some, there was, the other reason that we had the yellow curb there is we did have, and still have, a fairly severe drainage issue right there on Rollingwood Drive on that. And that is caused, and that was a concern that we'd have people parking there and it would be, the water would splash and cause a problem on that. So we, that's why we ended up doing that. And yes, it does bleed traffic throughout the neighborhood on that, but it keeps the roadway so that emergency vehicles and we can get the traffic through there a lot easier on that. So I hope that answered
Right,
your
yeah,
question.
it does, thank you.
Well, I will say that there was not full agreement on that aspect of the park master plan, the trying to get the cars out of the park.
Yeah.
Because there had been a huge effort years before to get the cars off of the streets, which is why we put in the parking lot, because people were complaining about all the parking on the street and saying that that was unsafe. So it keeps going back and forth on which is preferred by which council at
Yeah.
what point in time and whatever.
Now, if we could just get everybody to take an Uber or a bus, we'd be okay, but, you know, we hadn't been able to do that. So, it's a, you know, we all know if you've been, I'm starting over a new life with young kids again, grandchildren again, just grandchildren, don't pat it. So I'm having to relive the, actually I walk, but the parking is, you know, is what it is. And that's, I'm not wise enough to give you an answer as to what the solution of that'll be. That's obviously to something that could be worked on. But it is I realize that's an inconvenience to our residents that live next to the park. I would point out too that, and I want to back up just a little bit. Historically, we've tried to be, the city generally has tried to be cognizant of the impact of our park events on our adjacent neighbors. And there was some issues when we built the pavilion down here and allowed it to be used for birthday parties about that. And Rollingwood has changed some of the policies that we use on that. And I believe you need to be a Rollingwood resident now to reserve it. But you're getting ready to get a lot of birthdays and after-school parties there. And that's, you know, it's awfully difficult to be a Rollingwood police officer and have to go over there and run some 7 and 8-year-olds out of a birthday party. It's not that they wouldn't do it, but I'm sure they don't want to do it on that. It's a tough deal to do. So, but historically, we have been cognizant of our neighbors around the park about how we address some of the concerns that they've had come up on that. Can we do them all? No. But we've tried to at least recognize that there's an issue on that. Traffic is obviously one of them. And Nixon Drive is, you know, still a very narrow road to be parked on. And it's, you know, anybody opening a door on the outside of there is, you know, taking a chance when we have cars lined up there. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah.
I don't have an answer to your question, but I can just tell you what has gone through
I
with
just
that.
remember Flo was telling me that they fought hard to get the yellow curb across the street from us, and that's she's like, don't give that up. But.
Well, there's been historically there's been some issues about where we put the no parking signs, where we put the yellow curbs on that. And there always will be on that. And I don't have an answer to make everybody happy. We can put try to put we did try to put no parking signs up on areas that would become public safety issues about when the street would be, Gentry comes to mind, that we have issues about how we could get in and out of there and how wide cars could be. If you parked on both sides of some of our streets, you know, you've got one lane in the middle, and, you know, that is a problem on that. So I'll leave that to, I'll leave that to the wisdom of the council to resolve that issue.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? And Sarah, I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you, Alex did so much for our park on that, so I think I need to bring him up and tell you, he not only worked on it, but he planned on it and served on the park commission for ever.
6 years.
Would be a good term.
Six years.
Yeah, seemed like ever, I imagine, going through it, but did great work on that. So, and I would, going back to these pictures, I'd tell you that if you look at those, at that time, we had in Rollingwood some blue-collar oriented people. I'm one of them, I guess. But we also had lawyers, Brian Ryder, who spent a untold amount of hours working on the park, physically working on the park. Dick did all this and did just tremendous amounts of work for the city on that. But it was a great event, and I can't remember, but there were 100 people out there. At,
Every time we had it.
yeah, it was a number of people out there. So that was before we had a tractor. We have a tractor now, so we can do all kind of things if we want to. So anyway, any other questions on the park? Great. The second part of that was our mobility and connectivity issue. There were a couple of issues that I want to highlight on that. One is specifically I put in the survey, and I wanted this to be an important part of our survey, that whether or not the citizens of Rollingwood wanted reverse lanes on BK's Road. And that could be a very important. Remember, I'll remind everybody that TxDOT in their plan for BK's Road does have that provision in there that we would have the center turn lane being a reverse lane for morning commutes and afternoon commutes on that. Now, the impact to us as a city is that has a very adverse effect to us being able to get to some of our businesses on BK's Road on that. So I would encourage us to use that information in that survey as Mr. Mayor, you lobby TxDOT to get that part of it taken care of on that. So, because I think that would be a disservice to our businesses, and it would certainly violate the spirit of us trying to get more retail and neighborhood businesses along BK's Road in the future.
And if we ask them to donate property to put that in, and then it becomes a counterflow lane, whatever.
Yeah.
That makes it harder to get to their businesses?
Yes.
That
I will
would
tell
not
you
go over well.
the first part of BK's Road, we were able to get it was a compromise. We had a lot of our residents that wanted that to be a parkway with no center turn lane, but to have a vegetative barrier separating the east and westbound traffic. And we could not get the right-of-way, to your point, from at that time, Rollingwood was required to acquire the right-of-way and deed it to TxDOT. So we had to get the agreement of not only the property owner, but the lender and sometimes the tenant to be willing to give up that property on that. And we were able to get all the right-of-way in Rollingwood and part of the right-of-way that was dedicated to the city of Rollingwood that was within the boundaries of the city of Austin. City of Austin chose not to participate in that project. And so we were able to get the property owners, even in the city of Austin, to agree to give us their right-of-way so that we could get that part of the roadway fixed. A little history on that, which I don't want to spend too much time on that. We had a community, and I mean a real community, involving the Chamber of Commerce and business owners all up and down BK's Road that lobbied their representatives and lobbied TxDOT, wore a little sign, little buttons. We had buttons made that said BK's Road unsafe or something like that that needed to be fixed. That road was very curvy, if y'all recall. That portion of it that's been redone. So it's kind of time for TxDOT to finish that job, I think, without a counter lane on that.
Tom?
Yes, ma'am.
Ask one question. I'm assuming that if you are using this center lane to go one way during rush hour and the opposite in the next rush hour, the cars are still able to say turn left. They're in the inside lane that's supposed to be a nice flow of traffic, or do they stop and turn into the businesses, or are they just completely prevented from it?
I don't have an answer to that. All I can tell you is that it would block up traffic from.
Oh, I mean, that would just be.
But
Trying to
I
get
don't
on
know.
and off, you have an
Yeah, I think-
extra
Yeah.
lane that you have to
I don't know.
cut across.
And I'm presuming that part of this, and this is just my guess on that, is if TxDOT in their plan, if they redo MOPAC and 360, then a lot of that traffic that is now on 360 would come down BK's Road on that, and that may be what's their thought process on that is. You know, using all the asphalt that's laid is always a good idea, I guess, but not if it has a detrimental effect to our city, and I think this would have a detrimental effect to our city.
Definitely.
On that. So I would encourage that we do what we can on that to try to get that changed around a little bit. I know Mike tried to do that, and I don't know the reason behind why that, but I do know it's in the plan, and we did put it in the survey. We wanted to have this as another arrow in our quiver to show TxDOT which went on. Sarah, I believe the new rules on TxDOT is that they will acquire the right-of-way, or a good portion of it through eminent domain rather than us having to get
They're
it.
just gonna
which
take it and then make it hard to get into their businesses, right?
Yes.
That would make them real happy.
Yeah. I don't want to go in too much on what we have, but I will remind you that when we acquired the right-of-way from all those businesses on BK's Road, we did pass an ordinance, which I believe is still in effect, that said if you donate property to the city of Rollingwood for this roadway, then you can still count that partial that you donated as part of your impervious cover to build on the property on that. And since we had a huge setback at that time, it was not as painful to explain to a lender that we weren't ruining their collateral by doing this on that. So, and a owner. So, but that's how we came about what we had. one of the other questions we asked is speed limits on B. Caves Road, and I'll concentrate on B. Caves Road, and then we'll talk about interior streets of Rollingwood. On B. Caves Road, the speed limit. Our speed limit in Rollingwood on B. Caves Road, part of it is 45 and part of it is 40 miles an hour on that. And the question we posed in the survey was, would you be in favor of lowering the speed limit on B. Caves Road? And basically, it was a wash. The replies we got back, it was as much favorable about lowering the speed limit as it was opposed to lowering the speed limit on that. So since that's a TxDOT road, we really don't have the authority to do that. So it was just an opinion question. And the recommendation we would give is based on, TxDOT has their own formulas. Sarah, you probably know what it is, but Ron Hudson would know.
He would know.
But they have their own way to determine speed limits on a road on that.
It never made sense to me that the very first part of it's 45 and then it drops down to 40, because coming up Barton Springs, the speed limit is not 45.
Yeah.
So I don't know where it is that you are going 45 already, that you would need to keep that first part at 45.
Well, I think that once you're making that curve off of Mopac and you're doing it, the speed limit does increase to 45 miles an hour right there. That's where it increases. And then my guess is that most people are driving 45 from there on out,
And not
if they can.
And not 35 on Barton Springs?
No. But that's that's just, you know.
Coming off Mopac, you could be going fast, but you have to cut across 3 lanes of traffic to get to Barton's, to B Caves, so.
Well, hopefully
That
in the
doesn't seem
future, that would
safe.
be, that gets resolved favorably for our city when South Mopac, when and if South Mopac is complete on that. So, you know, big scary thought, but that's,
Yes.
you know, where we are on that. A couple of the other issues that we had on B. Caves Road, very sound majority really want that low water crossing fixed by TxDOT. Surprise, surprise. Not as many comments on that I read that came on Edge Grove is an important part of that from a standpoint of Edge Grove, as it was from a standpoint of, although there were few, there were some, and it just wasn't as much of a problem for people, I thought, as B. Caves Road was on that.
Tom, can I ask a question?
Sure.
I keep getting more and more worried about that area along B. Caves Road. It's on the right-hand side if you're going west, where the bar ditch is eroding to and under the pavement. And is that a Rollingwood issue, or is that a TxDOT issue?
TxDOT issue.
And has it been brought up to TxDOT?
It's on their plan.
Okay.
Now, the last plan I saw.
But it's getting scary in terms of dangerousness.
Y'all might have newer plans than I've seen, but the newer plans I saw actually moves the roadway to the south a little bit more, rather than try to take that hillside out on that. I still think they take some of it, but I think they're trying to move the roadway. They were trying. You've probably seen it since I have.
I'm supposed to meet with the new engineer. We're gonna go over those plans.
But, you know, that roadway has.
Could be a terrible accident there.
Yeah, there's been 3 areas that I can tell you that has been, that flood on B. Caves Road. It's not just the low water crossing. We have actually had water crossing the road at 2 other places. One between the creek and Mopac, and one between the creek and Rollingwood Drive that does cross there, backs up in those culverts and comes across the water on that. So it's an issue. And Mr. Mayor, when y'all talk to them, remind them that we almost, and I'll point this out, we almost lost a police officer there. We had a car that went around barricades, which we've had a lot of BMWs go around barricades. BMWs like to do that. I mean, it's several that I can tell you have been around the barricades. Not all of them are BMWs, but they drive around the barricades, and the water is 3 feet deep flowing across BK's Road, and they get swept downstream. And this officer, to his credit, went in and after this young lady that was in the water, and I guess he was he was out of duty for a couple weeks at the recovering from that. So that's not a you know. I don't remember anybody actually losing their life on that, but
Has anyone gone off the road where the pavement's being undercut by the drainage?
I don't recall. We'd have to have the police chief. I can't imagine they haven't, frankly. I can tell you that they have. We've had a number of wrecks where they hit the guardrail on the other side, going around the curve, and they spun out on the wet streets, including one of our police officers.
Yeah, on that curve, on that S curve,
Yeah.
we had an officer trying to go assist another officer, and he slid right off the road.
Yeah. So it's time for that, hopefully, and I have great faith in you, Mr. Mayor. I know you can pull this off.
See how it goes.
Yeah, but there's no guardrail there either.
Where I don't think they've got enough room to put a guardrail there. Maybe they could fill it in and do that. But I suspect TxDOT is waiting to see how South Mopac and BK's Road tied together before they end up trying to put something together on that.
Waiting for something catastrophic to happen before they fix it.
So
Yes, ma'am.
Tom, one question, I was just wondering why people there, I know that it's like strongly opposed to working with TxDOT on that section of the road, and then about 20% of people that were somewhat opposed, and then strongly opposed, and I was wondering what was the basis of their objections?
I didn't get,
We didn't
I don't
get that far.
recall getting any additional comments pretty much on that,
Okay.
except that their concern was increased traffic on some of the
BK
concerns I
Road.
got was, especially when we met with some of the neighbors on Timberline, that the traffic noise that would occur on BK's Road from that. And
If this question was worded this way, where it was a joint, it asks about fixing the low water crossing and lane expansion with shoulders and sidewalks. Some people might have been okay with fixing the drainage, but not
Yeah.
okay with the shoulders and sidewalks.
Yeah. Sidewalks are, they've decided that, and that was part of our negotiation on the first phase, that they wanted sidewalks there. So, and a bike lane, which and they have that during, through
federal
Westlake
requirements.
Hills. So, and I'd rather see a bike lane and a sidewalk. Well, you can't ride a bicycle on a sidewalk legally if you have a bike lane. And so I'd rather see a bike lane there than somebody in that lane today riding a bicycle on BK's Road, which we do have. So I think that's it on BK's Road. On our streets, and I'll try to close this off, Mr. Mayor. I know you got time elements. Rollingwood residents were favorable to making sure that we had an interconnection between our residential and our existing and future development that we have on BK's Road. And one of the things that we were going to recommend is that there be at least a pedestrian bridge that on Edge Grove that would allow people to cross the creek and tie in to our commercial district without having to get on that little very narrow area that we have on Edge Grove on that. Because I think that's a impediment to people wanting to either bike or golf cart or walk to existing and future businesses we have on BK's Road. That was a major point that I think was made, and we have other areas that could possibly be done, not just Edge Grove, but remember we have Delano Lane working with the City of Austin. That could be a connection to our BK's Road corridor also on that. So we looked at a number of studies that we've done, and there were a ton of them. We had the BK Road corridor study that was done in 1998. We've had the retail coach study that was done. So the city's paid for a number of studies on BK's Road on that. So as to how we could, you might want to, if as you dwell on how to do this, you might want to look at those studies. They got a little age on them, and they have to be taken with that in mind. But certainly that this is something that to get a good history of what we've looked at as a city over the last 30 years before that. The other thing that I'll point out on the mobility part of our residential streets, we'd like to recommend that we have an updated traffic study. Our residents want our city to be a walkable city, and some of the things that that could be done on that. Sidewalks everybody wants a sidewalk until you see the cost and the topography that we have to deal with and all the issues. But you know, that is something, the walkability part of our city is a very important part to our citizens on that. And you know, you just have to go out in the morning and you have everybody walking, and that's the greatest thing in the world, that you get to meet your neighbors, and everybody gets to do that. So some people run. Most of us don't anymore, but the young guys do.
Not as much. They'll run.
So I'll just give you the recommendations we had to the mobility. Conduct a traffic study with an eye towards creating a safe accessibility from the residential areas of Rollingwood to commercial areas along BK's Road, specifically along Delano Lane, Rollingwood Drive, and Edge Grove Drive at the crossing of the two roadways over BK's Road. I wanted to remind people that, and I don't know that I have that ever really got a firm answer, but I believe that Edge Grove Drive, the city of Rollingwood, at least on a portion of that road, owns about a 20-foot section of land, and it may be 20 foot on one side or 10 and 10, but we own some of that property there.
Where?
On Edge Grove Drive, from Rollingwood Drive to BK's Road on that.
Talking back over there behind the Shell station?
No, this is actually the roadway.
Bess's
All
house?
of along the street. Yeah.
The roadway was supposed to be wider, and we actually own a portion of that roadway, the property there. Now, we'd have to, whatever we have to do, these are our neighbors. We don't want to, we want to make sure that we do that in a manner that's not specifically going to hurt their property values or hurt their livability on that. But that's something that I'll point out. Actually, I don't think we ever found all that data on how far that went, but we do know that at least a portion of that, at least from Timberline to Rollingwood Drive. I know that, I think I was able to get that part of it, that we did have, I think it's 20 feet on that.
I think there was some discussion of that on one of the houses on Rollingwood Drive on Edge Grove, that they,
Yeah,
that the
the
city
one on the
owned,
corner, that's correct,
where Bess's house was.
yeah. And that's I think it's 20 feet there, right at that corner. Because I think they originally planned for an extra lane in there, or wider lanes.
Hmm.
Is it this on the east side or west side of Edge Grove?
I think
East.
it's on the east side,
East side?
yeah.
And it starts at the
Now-
corner of Rollingwood and Edgegrove, and then goes down?
That was the discussion that we had. I
You're
don't
saying 20
remember.
feet, I mean, how wide is it?
I can't remember, Roxanne, if it's
Exactly.
10 or 20 feet, but it's wide enough for us to do what we would want to do on a pedestrian trail. Maybe not a golf cart, but a pedestrian trail, a bike trail that would have that. Anything we could do that we would encourage people to shop and spend their money over on BK's Road, and encourage the development of retail by having people show up and not having to drive to get there, especially at $4 a gallon, then that would be a great thing for our city on that. And it just, but it's not just this part of that. Throughout our city, the traffic study could show that how we could enhance our ability of our citizens to safely get across Rollingwood Drive. Some people would like to see crosswalks, and that was a major ask. There are some issues with that, we all know, but that is something that is maybe a traffic engineer. One of the things we did discuss on that was, and I can't, pedestrian refuge islands that could be used as means to not only slow up traffic, but to give people a little, I don't like that term, but that's what they're called, and where you go halfway across the street, you get on a little island and wait for the other half of the street to go. So that's part of that. Consider creating pedestrian refuge islands and crosswalks on or near BK's Road at the intersection of Rollingwood Drive and Edgegrove Drive. And again, this is part of this would be TxDOT that could enhance the mobility part of their deal and go back and look at how, that's a fairly wide area that they could put something in there potentially to help us get our residents safely across BK's Road on that. Consider adopting a policy allowing usage of golf cart type vehicles on residential roads and up to commercial areas of BK's Road. We currently, state law gives golf carts, and unfortunately I had to deal with this, and I found out there's about 4 or 5 different type of categories that the state considers golf carts, and the rules that apply to each one. But Rollingwood does have some ordinances in place currently that requires you have to be of a certain age to drive a golf cart. You can't drive them on a state highway, BK's Road. That's illegal by state law on that. And they have speed limits that golf carts have to have a governor on there to keep them from down on that. Can't use ATVs, which I see. We didn't address the motorized scooters and bicycles, but that's probably something that the city may want to see about doing that. We have a lot of them, and all the kids have them, and they do 20 miles an hour, which, you know, I ride a motorcycle, so I'm, you know, I follow the rule that you don't ride any faster than you want to fall. But, you know, sometimes you do that anyway. So, anyway, encourage sidewalks on rears of commercial development for additional bike and pedestrian usage. This would not be that we would maybe take this on as a project, but that we would, as you had a project come in, you would encourage the usage of that. Remember, one of our comments we made was move the buildings forward on BK's Road, the commercial buildings as they come in, and have parking behind there. But this would also allow them to have access easier rather than get on BK's Road to get there from a pedestrian standpoint on that. Add a crosswalk over Rollingwood Drive next to Rollingwood Park. And I think we all know some of you may know that crosswalks have to, there are certain regulations you have to have for crosswalks, one of which is that they have to go to a sidewalk. But the traffic engineer may be able to come up with a alternative that would get us there. I'm not a traffic engineer and don't want to be, but that's something there. Add an improved hike and bike path along Edge Grove Drive from Rollingwood Drive to BK's Road. This is something that I think is very important. That's going to be a main thoroughfare for bikes, pedestrians, and golf carts on that. And this would be, in my opinion, and just my opinion, not our committees, but I think this would be a great project for RCDC to take on. It would be something that would be within their bounds of authority, and it would be encouraging retail development along BK's Road on that. I don't know why anybody make a shirt without a pocket. And that's what I have on that. If there's any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer them. Basically, this is it's a lot of hills to climb to get there, but I hope y'all have the information that the citizens are willing to impact, what we make recommendations on. It's the good part is it takes a long time to do these traffic plans and things, and they're not necessarily free. We may be able to get some money from the infrastructure bill. We may not, but I would ask that we work on this as a long-term project to try to get some of this done in conjunction with the recommendations that we had on our commercial development on that. Sorry, Ashley, I forgot you even had that up there. So, any questions? I'll be glad to try to answer them. Thank y'all very much, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate all y'all's service to our city.
Thank
Well,
you.
Thank
For all
you
your
for
work
all
on
your
this,
hard work.
Tom.
I would like to formally ask the council to pass a resolution formally thanking Tom for his dedication to the community and his continued work on this comprehensive plan
Thank you very much.
for the benefit of the residents of our community.
Well, I will tell you, we had a lot of people that, we had a lot of, a big group. Some participated a lot more than others. Brooke just knocked the stuff out, I'll just tell you that. And we had a lot of people that came in. We moved from different viewpoints to a consensus about where we were going to go. And I think that was the fact that everybody on there was willing to contribute and be willing to be open-minded about how to look at other views and be willing to move towards a consensus to our city on that. So I was very pleased with that part. Took a while, took longer than I thought it would take, but that's the nature of the beast sometime. So thank y'all very much for y'all's service, and I know y'all have a city council meeting coming up, and I'll leave it to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks. Thank you, Tom. All right, with that, we will move on to public comment and citizens who wish to address the council regarding matters covered in previous comprehensive plan workshops. Do we have anyone online wishing to testify? I see Mr. Shell. Anyone else? Going to assume that's a no, and I don't see anyone hiding in the back. So, council, do you have any other comments, questions?
I have one that I had asked about think it was at the second meeting, I wanted a survey question about the accessory, or accessory dwelling units.
Mm-hmm.
And Ashley sent that to me, and I do not agree with the interpretation that was put into the plan, because it said that those accessory dwelling units were supported, but the responses to the question were very evenly distributed from yes to no. And so I don't know how the plan was actually written and where we need to go to make any edits to that, but I am not comfortable with the wording in the plan that says that the citizens supported the accessory dwelling units, because I don't think that the survey data supports that
Well,
position.
it was a numerical deal, and it was a judgment as to whether they did that. I grant that. I would point out on that, Sarah, that remember we went through, when we were doing this, we were going through the coronavirus, and you may recall that if you had, I'm just going to give you one example of comments that I received on that.
Okay.
If you had a elderly parent
Sure.
and they were in a nursing home at that time, given the circumstances that we went through those 3 years, it feels like 30 years, but whatever years it was, then, you know, would I rather have them in next to me, or would I rather have them in a nursing home at that time? And that could be I just had to give you some comments I received on that came in on that. I think that I think this is a delicate issue from the city standpoint, and I'll make this comment on that too. One of the very strong negatives that we received is Rollingwood residents did not want short-term rentals. And obviously, if you have accessory buildings, it will be extraordinarily tempting to have short-term rentals in there. And I recognize that's the difference on that. But I think from a procedural standpoint, we present this report. There are we expect to get some edits and some changes from the council and input from the council on that. So it's not surprising, and I think that that's something that we would expect on that. So I think that you certainly have the ability and the right and to make that comment. I would just say that, you know, we had to take the comments we got and the information we received to get to that point. It was a close deal, no question about that. And there were a bunch of different things that came in on that. But I think that if you look at that and you want to make a change, make a change. I think that's the easiest answer, because this is something that
But even the change should be supported by the data. I mean,
it should be.
Right.
yeah.
Everything that's in here should be supported by the data,
Right.
and my interpretation of the data does not support that, along with everybody wants it to mean single-family residential, no
Yeah.
short-term rentals, and the drainage is the worst problem that we have in the city, and none of those things are compatible with a whole lot of accessory dwelling units being built in Rollingwood.
You know, I would tell you that, you know, these are all issues that y'all need to consider on
Right.
that, for certain, on that. I want to emphasize this, that very heavily, the city did not want short-term rentals on that. And how we would address that accessory buildings. And, you know, we have a society now, Sarah, that our kids are trying to move back. Something to look forward to, Alex. And we have aging populations to where we're starting to have situations where you want to have people come back in on that. So I'm not sure how you would address all of those issues together, and that's up to the council, I think, to make that determination on that. So, thank y'all very
I
much.
guess that makes me wonder about one question on the zoning. You brought up the zoning. Was there a resolution? Do we have an answer to what happens if you have these granny flats or these accessory dwelling units and it's single-family residential? At what point do you no longer have the single-family residential classification if you have these on your property?
It would
Can you
require,
legally restrict
Can,
it?
Yeah.
that's what I'm trying to,
yeah,
did we get a resolution to that? I don't know if that's something that you all,
we did not.
okay.
You know,
We did not.
the city of Rollingwood has got 12, 13 different subdivisions that each have deed restrictions, too. I doubt if any of them are enforceable by now, but they're there. And so that's something that, you know, to think about. I don't know the answer to that, Roxanne. We did not take a look at that. That's a legal question, and frankly, we didn't do that. I didn't do it. Sure.
I just got my, I had kept a copy of the original Pegasus designed,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And the question here was under, let's see, and it was not a very good survey, and I know we paid a lot of money for it, but
It's being
anyway,
generous.
$60,000. I don't even get me started on that. Anyway, so one of the questions here was an ordinance allowing accessory dwelling units or granny flats on single-family zoned lots, and there were 5 bubbles: strongly oppose, somewhat oppose, neutral, somewhat support, strongly support. And there was no place to say anything other than put a bubble in there, okay? So this whole survey,
Which survey is that? That's the survey
that's
that.
the original
Pegasus.
survey.
The Pegasus.
Okay.
survey.
Pegasus.
Okay.
I, because of my wanting to keep all this stuff, I made a copy of what I had submitted. I know I strongly opposed it. And then this is what came out of the, and I don't have the pictorial, what do you call the thing, but here it says, residents resoundingly oppose allowing short-term rentals for less than 30 days, that is, within Rollingwood, but support allowing residents to build accessory dwellings, sometimes called granny flats, on residential lots. But I don't know where that feedback came from, whether that question was, how it was worded in the second, which was our residential survey, that was put together by the commission, right, Tom? So how much of it came from the Pegasus survey, and how much of it came from
The
the
task force survey.
task force survey? I do not know.
Well,
But-
Ashley sent it to me, and let me see if I can find it.
I'm also looking for it.
Anyway, the long and the short of it is, because, like Sarah pointed out, you can allow people to do, but then there's a limit on how big, how much land is covered, and then your impervious cover. Who's going to, I know an example where there's a huge secondary building now that's been put up on Northwood Drive, one of the houses. And I'm thinking to myself, where is all that water going to go? We're going to have problems with drainage, which, we have to, I think, assess at the same time that we allow increased impervious cover. Since we don't have an impervious cover limit in Rollingwood, never had, so it's something to really think about. And Sarah brings up a very good point about these granny flats. So, anyway, just for your consideration.
Okay. Council, anything else?
My answers. I can't, it's font is so tiny,
Okay.
and I can't, I can't blow it up,
Oh,
no,
you
it
don't have
doesn't.
it.
Doesn't have touchscreen.
Mm-mm. it doesn't blow up, but it's,
Control plus sign.
oh, look there. Okay. So 20% strongly oppose, about 12% somewhat oppose, 18% was neutral, somewhat support was about 28%, and strongly support was maybe 21%. So the strongly oppose and the strongly support were almost exactly the same.
Slightly only.
Yeah,
But
so
I-
saying that the residents support it, I can't. Oh, well, there, I was looking at the bar. If you look at the actual numbers, strongly oppose 20.69%, strongly support 21.63%. So a difference of less than 1% between very much in favor and very much opposed.
Well, I don't disagree with that. I don't know that you could, we could sit here all night and do survey science. And,
Right.
I mean, I don't know that you could really say that anything in that poll is definitive.
Right, but if we adopt a comprehensive plan,
Yeah,
then
no,
we are supposed to follow it. And
I'm with you.
I don't want us to say, based on this data, that the residents of Rollingwood are in favor of accessory dwelling units, because I don't think that's reflected in the data.
And that's fine. I'm not even arguing that point.
Yeah.
I'm like, what's the plus minus on the survey? Anybody tell me
And
that?
how many responded, and they, you
Right.
know, I mean, there's all kinds of
I
things.
mean,
Right,
correct.
Now, is this Pegasus or is this
this
the
is,
task
this is,
force?
this is for the task force,
Okay.
the task force, yeah.
It sounds like on that would be similar to other issues that we've had where you would say, you know, the respondents were split.
Well,
and
like,
therefore we take
like the
our
off-leash
position.
area.
What-
I mean,
yes,
that
exactly.
said that there
That's-
was
I didn't
no
wanna break
clear,
that.
there was no
Right.
clear one
Right.
way or the other, and to me, this data supports that same
Right,
Type of verbiage.
assessment.
Right.
right.
So I would assume that that then would be when the plan is up for, in front of the council for adoption, that would be one of the changes that might be proposed.
Right.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I would support taking definitive language out all throughout it.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you show me a poll that's 850 people with a plus minus of 2, I'm not for it. I mean, you can't
Right.
say that anybody supports anything.
Right.
Yeah, I do think that was good work. I mean, for a volunteer
Absolutely. No,
process.
they did a great job. I just wanna be real careful
I do, yeah, I agree.
on something that has been contentious in the past, and that has been abused already, and that, you know, you open the door to a lot of other things that people don't want. If we say, oh yeah, people want those, and it's like, yeah, but they don't want it not to be single family or to have short-term rentals and, you know, all the other things that,
Well, and I think the whole comprehensive plan too says that much as Tom was indicating, COVID created a new reality for a lot of us. We have no idea what, you know, the majority of the community will be facing 10, 20 years. This is a projection and,
It's
you
a
know.
snapshot.
Right,
Right.
No question
right,
about
right.
that.
So I would be cautious. I mean, I think it's good for setting intention, but saying that we need to follow any comprehensive plan or something like that, I think is perilous. I think any of the issues that we would be looking at addressing need to be kind of freshly ferreted out before moving forward on it.
right, and my concern though is that the comment was made at the beginning of this process is that state law requires that if you have a comprehensive plan, your zoning rules have to follow it. We don't have to have a plan.
Right.
But if we have one, then we have to follow it. So I wanna make real sure that if we adopt a plan, that we can live with the things that are in the plan, because that's what we're committing to.
You can add to that as time goes by, because this does, one of the recommendations is that this be reviewed periodically by the city, and updated based on, I don't know what we're gonna have next, but I'm sure it'd be something fun.
Right, sure.
That's something that, as a city council, and I understand your concerns there,
Right.
If I were looking at this, I probably would say, if I was concerned about something, I would just, I probably would refer it, leave it, not take a stand on that, and leave it to and send it to P and Z to have, some discussion about it too, and see what they thought. That's probably is the way to do it, because there are people, now I will say, there are people, regardless of COVID, there are people that I spoke to that wanted and this is and I'll remind everybody that one of the big concerns of Rollingwood residents was drainage. Okay, that said, there were people that said, I would like to have a house that has a separate place for a nanny or a maid or whatever. So, that's a reality of parts of Rollingwood today. And, we do have their residents, their neighbors, and they have their opinion, and that's what they wanted on that. One big concern, and I'll go back on this again, is the enforcement if we have these type of things on short-term rentals. Because that was a very strong feeling in our community that we wanted to remain single family. We wanted to remain non-short-term rentals on that. So I hope that answers. Thanks all.
Thank you again, Tom.
So, Mr. Mayor, question.
Yes,
When
ma'am.
do you see this coming to the council for, discussion and action?
My thought was that I would visit with you and see what your thoughts were on that. I've
And
I've learned my
actually-
lesson of bringing things too quickly to your dislike.
Actually, I think we also need to get Charlie to tell us whether it needs to go to planning and zoning before it comes back to the council, or whether we adopt it provisionally, subject to whatever. I just don't know what that
I
process
think we've had
is.
some of those preliminary conversations with Mr. Zek, and I'll need to refresh what his answer was on that and get back to you.
Great.
I mean, it could, I would say, well, let's talk about it offline
Okay.
and get guidance from council on it. But, I mean, it could conceivably as early as, at least for an initial discussion, maybe next month. I would like to move on to the next phase, which we've sort of talked about, which is starting to pull some of these items together for a bond discussion. So I want to keep that in our sights, but, so, let's talk about it offline and visit with Mr. Zek about it.
Sounds good.
Council, anything else that you'd like to discuss this evening? All right, with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
We have a motion for Ms. McKee to adjourn.
Second.
A second for Ms. Hudson. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you all.